Hey Harp Marketer, it's Elizabeth from Harply. In this lesson, I'm really excited to talk to you about pricing strategies. It's really important that you know your numbers. That's the basic thing. If you're going to go out there and ask for people to pay you money in order to play harp for things, you need to know ahead of time what you're going to be charging. Don't wait for someone to come up and ask how much do you charge for such and such. Even if you haven't done that kind of event before, have a set price already in mind so that you're just informing them, this is how I do it, rather than sitting there saying, does this amount sound okay? Because first of all, you don't look professional if it's clear that you're making it up on the spot. Secondly, if they know you're making it up, that gives them a lot of room to negotiate. So make sure that you tell them, oh, I charge this amount for this. And when it's said in that way, they're a lot more likely to say, oh, okay, I can afford that, or no, I can't, or is there something that I can have for this amount, whatever it may be. But having a plan ahead of time so that you know you're going to be appropriately compensated, already knowing ahead of time how much work and time and even money you're going to have to put into fulfilling the gig so that you don't end up losing money, or after it's all said and done realized, wow, I made $5 an hour. I could have done better working at McDonald's. So there's 3 different ways that you can calculate your costs, and these are from the business industry that we are going to be talking about and applying for how they work for a gigging harpist. The first method is called cost plus. So in this method, you take the cost of your product or service and you take that plus a certain amount. Usually it's times 3. For example, if you were selling a shirt and it cost you $10 to buy the shirt, you would take that $10 times 3 and you would sell it for $30. That way you're covering your overhead. Maybe you have $5 or $10 of overhead and then you're making about $10. So that is a really common way to do it when you're selling a physical product. You can apply that same kind of idea to services. It's just a little bit trickier when figuring out, okay, what is my cost? One example is you could say, well, how many years of harp lessons did I take? Let's say it was 10 years of harp lessons times 50 lessons a year. That's 10 times 50 is 500. And let's say you paid $50 per lesson. So 500 times 50 is 5,000. It's like $25,000 if I did my math right there. Well, that's a huge investment that you invested in getting to where you are today in order to be able to play this music for them. What about your harp? Let's say that you play a pedal harp and it costs $20,000. That's a huge investment. We're now at 25 plus 20, that's $45,000 that you have invested that you had to pay in order to get you to where you can perform on the harp. We're not talking about the time you've invested in practicing and learning. We're not talking about whether or not you went to college and how much that costs. How about all your accessories? What if you have electronics, iPads? Have you attended conferences? What about your harp insurance? Even if you're not taking that into consideration, we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars. So, do you deserve to be paid when you go out and play? Yes, you do. And don't let anyone tell you that I'm going to give you $25 an hour. That's a good rate. No, that is not. So if you were to take how much you've invested into yourself as a harpist, let's say that you've invested $50,000 into getting you where you are today, just to throw out a number. And then you want to say, I want to do X number of gigs per year and I plan to gig professionally for this number of years. You could actually take that and divide it out to say, okay, this is my cost per gig, and then multiply it. So there are ways to do it. It's not real solid when you're doing that kind of calculation method. So let's move on to method number 2, which is market value. So in this pricing method, you say, okay, well, what's my competition charging? So maybe you submit a quote request on one of those lead generation sites and see what other harpists respond and how much they're charging. Maybe you talk to your local musicians union and see what kind of rates they have. Maybe you talk to other instrumentalists. Do you work with a violinist, a guitarist, a cellist? whatever it may be, see what they're charging and kind of get a feel for what else is going on in your market. So checking your competition's pricing, but then also checking, well, how much do you think the market will bear? Sometimes people set their pricing based on, what do I think people will be willing to pay? That is not a great way to set it. First of all, why do you think that that's the number they'll be willing to pay? Is it because you just assume? Do you have any research to back that up? Well, I put that number out one time and some people paid it. Okay, but what if you put out double that amount? Would they pay that? Well, you don't know if you haven't tried. Maybe, oh, I quoted this high amount for a couple gigs and nobody booked me at that. Well, they may not have booked you if you'd quoted half that amount. How do you really know? We make these assumptions and we really can't say. So I do not recommend using market value. However, what I will say is you do want to be somewhat aware of what other people in your area are charging to ensure that you are not undercutting other professional harpists. And that is a big problem in our industry. Sometimes it's done on purpose, sometimes it's done out of ignorance or on accident because people don't know what other harpists are charging, or they assume, oh, that person has a doctorate in the harp and has been doing this for 50 years, so I need to charge less because I'm not as good, I'm not worth as much money at them. Versus that person who has a doctorate in the harp is looking at it and saying, I'm losing all my business because if I charge $400, that person charges $200 and everybody picks them. I can't get any work. So whereas the harpist may not be meaning to undercut them, by devaluing yourself, you're actually hurting the other harpists in your area. So you do want to be somewhat aware of other people are charging. Now, if other people are charging $200, you can still charge $400. That is okay. Just don't charge $100. Don't undercut them, but it's totally okay to be higher if you feel like that's not enough, I need to charge this much, and if you can justify it. And that takes us to pricing model number 3, which is called perceived value. In this pricing model, we are setting our prices not necessarily based on our costs, not necessarily based on what we think the market can bear or what our competition is charging. We're setting our prices based on the value that we are delivering. And it has that word perceived. So as a harpist, it's hard to put an exact number on the value of a service. Now, if you're selling a physical product, let's say you're selling a harp. Okay, you can put a number on that because you can look and see, well, it was purchased for this much, it's this many years old, other similar harps of that age are being sold for between this and this, it's in this condition. You can come up with a pretty accurate value for that physical instrument. So perceived value is the value that people place on it based on the perception. So this is all about placing yourself and portraying yourself as valuable. And this is done through a number of different ways. In the advanced lesson, I'm going to be talking more about strategies that you can use to increase the value of what you're offering it. Make it look like more, not like it's more than it is. It's not tricking the client, but show the client how much you have to offer and how great your services will be. So if you can create that perceived value, a lot of times clients will actually choose the most expensive or more expensive option because of the value. I know that in my area, I do charge more than a number of other harpists. Probably not everybody. I don't know what every single harpist charges for every type of event, but I do know I'm in the upper range and I get a lot of gigs because I'm able to portray my services with that perceived value. And even though someone else may quote it lower, the person ends up hiring me because of the image that I'm able to portray, the resources that I'm able to give them, and the assurances that I'm able to give them about how the process is going to be, etc. So there really is a lot that you can do if you can work to set yourself up as a professional. And yes, even if you are just now starting gigging, even if you don't have a lot of experience, you know how to play the harp, you have invested in lessons, you have invested in an instrument and accessories, and you are able to produce the music. As long as you have that, as long as you're not just someone who's self-taught, just starting out, been playing the harp for 3 months, and now I'm going to go do weddings, As long as you're not there, if you really can play the harp and you are able to deliver a good product in terms of the music, then there are ways that you can present yourself to help the client choose you, maybe over, not even necessarily over another harpist, but over another option. Why should the client choose harp over a violin when harp's going to be more expensive? It takes us a lot more work and time to get set up. It's a lot more that we've invested in our instrument most of the time. And so we do tend to charge more than some other instruments. So why should they do that? Why should they pick a harp over a CD? That's the cheapest, right? So being able to portray to the client these things and why it's worth that money, and that's the key. Why are you worth it? If you can help the client see that you are worth it, they'll choose you.